Welcome to the Tippy Top, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs succeed by sharing best practice and creating alignment with investors. You'll hear from seasoned entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and industry professionals. The Tippy Top helps you learn vicariously because you simply don't have the time to learn every lesson through the school of hard knocks. Today, we're joined by JP Luchetti, and you'll find out that you'll be hard-pressed to find a better product expert than JP. JP and I met very recently whilst doing a webinar on helping entrepreneurs and much more. Thanks again for being on the show, JP.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Would you like to kick off by giving us a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, so I think the core of my background is in product design and venture design. Born and bred in Argentina. I had my first agency, which I sold and moved to the UK. I was involved in a company called Movaloo, which was the leading mobile app developer in Europe, and that's where I lead the strategy team. Now I work I lead the DZ startup division. I also am a venture partner in a fund in Argentina where I was born. And also work one-on-one directly with startup founders through a company called Who's Fabio, which I'm a co-founder of. And what I concentrate on today, day in and day out, is working with founders to go from idea to their first raise. So going from idea to your first proper raise, a pre-seed with at least £1 million valuation, and getting startups, I would say, off the ground.
Amazing experience, and I'm really looking forward to learning a lot today, as I did during our first encounter. We've got three main topics of discussion. We've got startup failure, we've got the fact that founders typically overpromise, and then we get into the PMF, NPS, and North Star metric, and more to follow on that. But first up, talking about startup failure. So according to CB Insights, the number one reason why startups fail is because they fail to raise a follow-on round. Is that aligned with your experience, JP?
Yeah, super aligned. And I think I reached out to you the other day, and you were having a conversation about this same topic. And the way we see this idea of failing due to not being able to raise a follow-up, for me is very simple. And it has to do with basically not delivering what you promised to your investors, right? Mm-hmm. Your investors want to follow up. If you get an investor involved in pre-seed, they want nothing but you to succeed, and they want to give you more money so that they can support their position in your company. So when a company is failing to do a raise and to follow up on the next, is because they've broken their promise. The way I see it is they've came in and they said, I'm going to build this great company. We're going to need some money, and I'm going to deliver this. And then the money gets depleted. We spend the money, and we've not delivered on our promise, right? And that's where I see the problem. The problem is not so much about running out of money. It's about not being able to keep your promise to your investors, because your investors want to follow on. All investors want to follow on. Every investor wants you to succeed, right?
Yeah.
So it's not keeping your promise. And the problem there is creating achievable promises. I work a lot with startup founders, and I say a great round is not one that is oversubscribed, it's one that is under-promised. I'd rather raise half as much and promise a third that raise 3 times as much and promise something that we cannot deliver. So, and I'm less worried about the timing when we talk about the promise. It's about can we achieve this with the resources that we're asking for? Because if you're there 3 months late, it's not a problem. No investor's going to say, you told me January and now it's July. Doesn't matter. The milestone is taken. You've achieved the business goal. And when you look at pitches, super early stage pitches, you look at this concept called use of funds, right? And it's how are we going to spend your money? And it's that's not the point, right? They're investing in you. They're investing in your ability to drive this company forward. You need to be able to articulate what you're going to give in return, not how you're going to spend the money. The use of funds is a due diligence thing. You can only fail in use of funds. You cannot win in use of funds. People can only realize, I don't want to invest in this guy because he wants to like grow his team, double his team in less than a month. It's impossible. It's not realistic. So you can only drop investors in the use of funds concept. The promise for me is the key part of creating a relationship with an investor that is healthy.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm going to fund you. This is what I'm going to provide in return.
Yeah.
And we both agree that when I bring it, you're going to give me more money.
Absolutely. And I really have to echo that point that investors want to follow on because they want to make 10x, but not 10x on their 100K initial investment. They want to make 10x on 2 million invested. And that way they have 20 million and that flows down and helps pay for the operations.
And sometimes founders don't get it, but if you look at the business of a fund, the money's in the follow-on.
Yeah.
The money's in the follow-on. The first investment is I'll pay to see. And if you promise too much, you're setting yourself to fail, right? You need to play that hand really, really well. Your first hand needs to be really good. You need to be over-delivering on your promise. Yeah. You said you're going to have 5,000 customers. You better have 6,000 customers, right? So it's all a conversation about valuation after that. That's where the VC makes its money, in the follow-on, like on that round, not before.
Yeah, there's a really good ratio we work with, and that's that you invest 1/3 on the seed round and then 2/3 on the follow-on. So if you've raised 250 on your entry round, you should be raising at least 500K from those same investors on your late stage seed, or you've done something wrong. So this is even prior to getting to Series A.
Exactly. And that's where you get to this like bridge rounds and stuff like that. Yeah. Because you go to investors like, you told me you were going to deliver that. You have not delivered. You've broken your promise. What am I going to trust you again? What is this? And that's where like the partnership breaks. So when I hear failing to like secure follow-on, it's somebody has not delivered on their promise.
Absolutely. Now, coming on to hockey stick projections, do investors need to see them to get excited? Should entrepreneurs be promising them and then getting into the DD and saying, maybe we were a bit overzealous and then tone them down slightly? What's your view?
Yeah, again, you see a lot of pitches where the hockey stick comes in 3 months, and you need to be like super careful with stuff like that. Again, you're setting yourself to fail. You're setting yourself to not be able to deliver on your promise. I see it all the time, and you can't. I'd say you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. It's just simply you can't put the hockey stick projection in 3 months ahead. It's just not happening. But yeah, growth is key. Like growth is the key of what you need to show investors, and it needs to be backed up by your overall strategy. Like, what are you talking about here? What is your like 3 or 4 step plan at very high level, and then align that strategy with your projection. But yeah, the hockey stick in 3 months' time is a typical thing that you could see on a keynote, on a pitch, and it's just like not allowed.
Not allowed. I love that. And do you recommend that they do a low, medium, and high case, or stick with one truly conservative case?
Yeah. I think I prefer like a conservative approach, but aggressive on the growth. Like you need to show that you are, if you're going for institutional investment, you need to show that your objectives align, right? We're talking about 10x here, right? We're talking about like the fund is looking for an investment that will basically return the whole fund on one shot. You need to be aggressive in that way. You need to say, we've got the same objective here, but you can't use magic. And you need to be measuring a lot to be able to say, this is about to blow up. You need to be really measuring your product market fit and your NPS scores and understanding your conversion rates throughout the product to be able to say something like it. And still, it's very difficult because also the VC would say, great, let's talk in 3 months. Right? It's like the hockey stick starting in 3 months. It's like also for you, like if the hockey stick starts in 3 months, even as an investor, I would say, guys, wait for the hockey stick. Your valuation is going to multiply by 10.
Yeah, I think that the hockey stick usually starts when the money lands. So it's always 3 months delayed. Anyway, let's delve back on that mechanism for startup failure. What about co-founder conflict or conflict with investors? Do you see that as being a mechanism for failure?
I haven't personally. We had only one case in which we had co-founders fall out, and the company. The problem there for me is not so much on the fallout in itself. It's about like how you handle it. Yeah. It's very typical that, if you're co-founding, sometimes things are not set up correctly. Like everybody should vest. Doesn't matter that you've been there from the beginning. Everybody should vest because it's in the best interest of the company. Yeah. So you can't fall out, and one of the co-founders can leave. They can't take 25% with them. It's just not possible because you kill the company. You've got debt equity, and nobody's ever going to invest in it. So I'm less worried about like co-founders falling out because unfortunately you can replace anyone. It's more about how you handle the fallout and continue to see the company as an investable vehicle, because the minute you break it up in a bad way, it's just not investable anymore.
Yeah. Well said. So it's not actually about conflict. It's about, if there is conflict, handling it, but it's more about financial governance and that growth, and of course, being aligned with your investors. Now, before we go really deep dive into VC-backed startups, what about bootstrap startups? What is their mechanism for failure?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about my experience with Bootstrap. I'm sure that there are bootstrap companies that are like, don't fall into this space. But my experience with bootstrapping is that the nature of the business is it's very, 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 very focused on product. Very focused on product and less in business. I've got like bootstrap co-founders that are like all about their product, and they're like, any minute that they can spend, they can tweak it and put a new feature in and so forth, and nobody's looking at the business, right? They're not designed to grow and scale, and it's more about, it comes from passion and from love for whatever they're doing. But I see less of them turning around and saying, okay, we really need to work on this growth stuff. We need to work on the business side of the business. And I am sure that there's bootstrap companies that are really good at this stuff too, right? They're good at the business stuff. I don't want to put everyone in the same bag, but my experience with bootstrap is that it comes from a different place.
Yeah, fair enough. You keep coming back to it. It's all about that growth and scaling the business. Now, next up, a slightly provocative question. Is there ever a good reason for startup failure, and in the context of the experience that gives you to succeed on your next venture?
Yeah, I like, as a venture partner in the fund that I mentioned before, we look at that a lot. We look at like, what is the baggage that the founders bringing in, because it shows their skill. And more we see founders that are very flexible. Like I've met founders in the last 6 months that are like, they've been to YC with a concept and they came out with something completely different because they were flexible, they realized. And if you look at it, you can consider that like a failure, right? I consider it a great success when they come out, because they've like literally considered that is a process of transformation. It's not a process of validation. They're not there to validate their idea. They're there to transform their idea into something that is investable. And halfway through it, the value proposition is not resonating, and you have a new value proposition, and you could say, is it a different startup? Yeah, it's a different startup. You could consider that startup created a product, failed, didn't deliver, couldn't sell anything, and then they started this one. They just didn't do that bit, the last bit, because they knew that the value proposition wasn't resonating. So more and more, I see founders that are a lot more flexible and funds that are a lot more like flexible in the way they see startups too. Like we had conversations where, you know, it's the third iteration of the value proposition, and we see it as a great thing. Wow. Because it shows their skill to, you know, not just close their eyes and hope for the best. It's like, it's not working, we need to address it, right? We were talking with a startup that kind of iterated their model 3 times in 1 year. And it's like, and now we're confident that's the model that we need to do. It's like, great. It shows the skill of the founder to drive the company into success, right? And it's the difference between listening, learning from the market, and changing your startup to just going at it and hitting the wall.
Yep, amazing. I'm glad you said that. I couldn't agree more. And analogy I like to use is that founders should be like spring steel, that they're, you know, strong but flexible. They can bend with advice, flick back the unhelpful advice, and take on and become stronger from everything that they've learned to date. Now, earlier you mentioned to me that you've got a prove and promise framework. It sounds really interesting. Tell us more about that.
So what we say is like we boil down a raising money, going for a round, into a very simple transaction. Like, and we literally ask the founders to do this. Whenever you go to a meeting with an investor, you bring in proof. It could be super early stage and you just have, you know, a waiting list and a pilot, right? The waiting list proves that there is a market. You got 5,000 people that gave you their email. You pitched the value proposition and said, I'm interested, please send me an email whenever you release, right? So your waiting list proves that there is a market out there, and it proves that you can go and get it. You know where they are. Then you have a small pilot, 5 clients in a very rudimentary product. And that product's been like, I would say, progressing towards product market fit. You've got your measurements. And that proves that your value proposition can be implemented into a product and drives value for your customers, right? So you've got things that you've proven and you bring them to the table and you say, this is my startup, this is what I've proven. And then you literally promise them something and say, if you give me this amount of money, I promise you that I will turn this into this. And I will literally tell them, you need to literally say this out loud. You can't go out of the meeting without promising them something, right? You always prove and you always promise. When you do your follow-on, you grab your previous promise and it's like, what did we promise? Check, 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 check. You come in with proof. Guys, I promised you this. This is the proof that I've delivered. Yeah. We have a waiting list. We had 5,000 people waiting list. Now we have 5,000 customers. We had a rudimentary product. Now we have a product that's live and it's scaling, right? So it's always a very simple transaction. You're always proving something and you're always promising something. And being able to articulate that in a very simple slide at the end of it. Like people talk about like investment theses. At the end of it is, guys, this is what we've proven. This is what we're promising. In black and white, would you like to invest? And that's it.
I like that. It's really simple. Now, you know, I can just see people thinking, oh, you know, I feel quite exposed. What if I don't deliver? You know, it's a really bold move, actually.
It is. And you have to have a very clear plan and understanding of what you want to deliver and how you're going to deliver it. And I'm not talking about like a Gantt chart. I'm talking about like literally figuring out what do we need to prove and what is the easiest, fastest, and most cost-effective way of proving that, right? If you want to prove that there's a market, the most cost-effective way of doing it is a waiting list. You don't have to prove anything more. You don't have to create your product. Most people say, no, I didn't want to talk to customers because I don't have my product yet. It's like, you don't have to have your product to talk to customers, right? So really being aggressive around what needs to be proven and what is the easiest way to prove that. That for me is the core. And you need to have a very clear path that you're taking. I sometimes say it's like being a startup founder, especially if you're a solo startup founder, feels a little bit like, you know, like a pilot of a plane that crash landed in the desert. And it's like, if you're a solo founder, you're just mostly, without a super clear plan, you're walking in circles, and you find yourself kind of asking yourself the questions that you thought you've answered months ago. And it's like, how did I get back into this crash site? And it's like, I thought we've sorted that problem out, and you're like going in circles. And that's the key for me, is like having a clear path of what you need to achieve, a north. Just like I said before, like our first milestone is a waiting list, a pilot. Like that's it, that's a north. It's like, you got a compass now, like sort it out. Making that promise defines your north. You need to be very careful in what you promise, but it defines your north. Anything else is accessory. It's not important. Your promise to your investors is the thing that you are here to deliver. So for me, you need to be careful in what you promise, but it must be there. Because if not, you don't have a plan. And then you're lost in the desert. You don't have a north.
Yeah. I love that analogy. It's quite brutal, you know, that the plane has already crashed. It's not some corporate Learjet that you just need to keep going. And there's some comfort I can take from that. And just looking at it, it just seems to be all about expectation management with, you know, investors, suppliers, team members. Can it really be that simple?
Yeah, I would say the first expectations that you need to like manage is yours, the founder. And the promise is about a plan. It's not so much about like, it's about aligning expectations, but it forces you to come up with a plan. It forces you to define a north. It forces you to look at the desert and say, I'm going to head for that mountain. And I hope that the desert finishes before I die, because I need to get somewhere. And the idea is, it is defining the north. But the most important thing is the defining north for you as a founder, because you don't want to be lost in the desert, and you don't want to come back on the same like wreck, right? You don't want to walk in circles. So that north for me is the first expectation that you need to align is with yourself. And then of course it's very easy, because anybody in the team is like, we're going for that mountain, right? It's very easy to say, guys, waiting list, pilot. That's it. Anything else is just, you know, we'll discuss it at the pub. Waiting list, pilot, go.
I love that. It's just so clear. And, you know, the analogy I sometimes use is looking at, you know, the rudder of a ship, and just, you know, there's a really good saying that a little rudder far from shore is a lot better than, you know, lots of rudder when you're nearing the rocks. And it's all about calibrating that rudder, making sure that it's the right direction before you set sail. Now, of course, it would be remiss of me not to ask you about product market fit, with you being such a good product market expert. Tell us about, what is product market fit? How do you know you have it, and how do you measure it?
Yeah. So product market fit is the kind of this concept in the market where like your product is good enough for the market and it's poised to grow. Like what you have, the market considers incredibly valuable, right? There's different ways of measuring it, but the overall is like, you need to basically understand when your product is addressing customers' needs to the point that it's practically better than anything else out in the market. And the way you typically measure that is by talking with your customers. Let them experience your product. And typically you would say, oh, my customer satisfaction is a 93%. And you could say, yeah, our like NPS score is 82, which is great. But that doesn't really communicate how unique your product is regarding the way you deliver on the needs of the market. And the way you measure product market fit is you create this situation for a client and you say, imagine for a second, I don't exist anymore. You know, this concept of like, you don't know what you got until it's gone. And it's like, imagine I don't exist. And let's talk about how you feel about that, right? And it's not about like your experience and you scoring us and how likely are you to recommend it to a friend or a family member. It's like, no. Stop everything. Imagine we don't exist anymore. Tell me how you feel. What would you do? How would you feel, right? And what you're looking for is 40% of your customers to say, I will be highly disappointed. You give them 3 options, of course. Highly disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or I don't care. If you get 40% of your customers to say highly disappointed, you are poised to growth. And it sounds super low, right? I had a lot of founders come into the room. It's like, this is how we're going to measure product market fit. I'm going to score 40. I'm going to score 80%. They come back with 10. It's like, I don't know why. It's a great product. It's like, yeah, but you need to understand that when you shut it down, people can go back to what they were doing before. They can go to a competition. They can do a million things, right? There's always a way to get the job done. And the feeling that they communicate is the mother. Because when you say I'll be highly disappointed, you mean that you understand that what you're bringing to the table when it comes to getting the job done is special, it's unique. And thinking about going to where I was doing before makes me feel bad. And that's the mother. Like, you use any other like metric to measure. And I worked on a startup that had 10 million downloads, and it was a weather app. And I had one review that said, they gave me 1 star, and they said, because it's raining outside. And it's like, how can I communicate this? And the product market fit score is exactly that.
Yeah.
Right? It could be raining outside, but I would tell you what happens if my app doesn't exist anymore. You know, you don't know how to get dressed in the morning. You don't know what to get dressed on. Is it going to rain? Is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be hot, cold? What's going to happen? You don't know now. And that is where really the true testament of how your product is performing comes through. Yeah. When you take it away.
I love that example. It's such a visceral one. And, it's all about the feeling and getting your customers emotional about your product. And that's how you've got product market fit. Now, coming back to an earlier comment, we were saying, often founders end up polishing the product too much. So how do you balance that versus making sure you've got true product market fit?
Yeah, we call it a machine of product market fit. And it is very typical that we concentrate too much on product and we create too many features and we embellish the product a lot. And what we tend to recommend is you need to consider your product as a patient that is never going to leave the hospital. Okay, you're never done with product. You're always going to want one more feature, and you're always going to say, if we had that feature, we would be like, it's this feeling of inadequacy, like that never ends. You're always going to feel inadequate. That's it. Your product will always feel inadequate. It doesn't matter how good it looks, how polished it is. I can assure you that, the best products that are out there, their owners feel inadequate. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's like, you need to accept it. That's it. You're always going to want one more feature. And the second thing is that you need to understand that product is in the service of the business, right? So the first thing is having next to your patient that machine that they put in the hospital that goes beep, beep, that tells you the pulse of the product. Like, these releases, are they improving product market fit? Are they improving NPS scores? What are your ratios looking like? What is the problem inside your product that you need to concentrate on? Like, I had a conversation today. Startup founder comes in and it's like, we're thinking of putting into the product. And it's like, great, what for? To increase the communication with customers and make sure it's like, what for? Open the dashboard. Tell me which number is going to change.
Brutal.
It's like that. Like, what you need to understand, like what we need to understand is that we are creating a machine of product market fit that introduces changes into the product to achieve that. Right? Now you tell me we have a really low activation ratio, and I'm going to use Intercom to make sure the people activate, because I'm going to be there. I'm going to push them here and push them there to make sure that they activate. And I'm going to change my activation ratio from 5% to 15%. Now we're talking. Now I want to have a conversation, right? It's like, we don't bolt on things to the product, whether features or third-party bolt-on, just because, right? Because if not, you bolt on feature and you don't have an expected outcome, and then you don't know if the feature works or not.
Yeah, no, excellent.
We bolt on that. You bolt on intercom, and 6 months after that, it's like, it's working. I go into the app and I can put a question and it comes up on my phone and I can answer it. And it's like, yeah, but it's working for the business. Like, what are we trying to achieve? That's the key of like creating a machine, or what we call a machine of product market fit. It's all about understanding what's the impact, and then doing a series of iterations when you implement to make sure that gets tweaked in really well.
Yeah, hugely valuable. And you see Andrew Ten talking about new feature fallacy, and you just see it time and time again. It's so easy to fall into that trap. Now, talking about NPS scores, Net Promoter Scores, you've got a really good definition for that. What is that?
Yeah, for me, the NPS score is basically, will your customers put basically their name to your product?
Yeah.
It's like, would you recommend my product to a friend or family? It's like, are you happy to put your name next to ours? Are you happy to put your reputation on the line? I know that I'm taking it way to the extreme, but if you think about what it is, that transaction that you're asking someone, when you say recommend, is like, you're going to put your name next to us. You're saying that this is a good enough product for you. This talks about you, well, like what you stand for, right? People sometimes take it lightly, but that is the transaction that you're asking a customer when they recommend you, is to put the reputation on the line for your product.
Amazing, hugely valuable. And now I believe those two then feed into the North Star metric. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. So that's, for me, the key of this like product market fit machine. And the North Star metric has to do with the core thing or the core job that you do for your customers, right? If you have a fintech app that helps people save, it's the savings ratio. If you have a product that helps people find secondhand fashion online, is the overall conversion of your search, the overall conversion rate of people buying the product that they end up finding in your platform. So the North Star KPI is directly embedded into the core, what you do for your customers, and the outcome that you're helping customers achieve. And that, for me, is the mother of the business, right? It's like, what do you do for a living? I help millennials and centennials save more money and invest in their retirement. Great. Savings ratio needs to be your North Star KPI. We are helping them achieve an outcome. They were in 3%. When we come in, they're in 15%. Okay, that's the business. And that North Star KPI aligns the whole business around it, right? Again, if it's not a North Star KPI, we can discuss it at the pub. But all the features need to be associated to that. Like, how does this feature help people increase their savings rate? Let's talk about that. And yeah, North Star KPI is like, it's showcasing how good your business works as a business.
Yeah, I love that. It's outputs focused as well. It's not inward looking. So I just want to summarize the three main topics of today. That startup failure, it's all about getting that growth, being flexible in your value proposition and aligning with investors. Number two, bring proof and promise your investors something. And number three, product market fit. Get at least 40% of your customers saying they'll be hugely disappointed if you didn't exist. Now, if you could maybe just tell the listeners where they can find you online, and then we can jump into some quick fire Q&A.
Yeah, of course. So I would say there's a lot of material, a lot of collateral in our website, whosfabio.com. There's a whole like boot camp to go through. Most of the stuff that we talked about today. I would say if you're keen on learning about the things that we talked about today, just check us out.
And I'll include the link in the post. So quick fire questions. What's your formula for success?
Yeah, so when it comes to going from like idea to what we call our first raise to your 1 million plus valuation, we got a very, very simple like recipe to success. And it's, again, what you need to prove. Part of the proven promise, what you want to walk into the meeting to investors that you've already proven. The first thing is you want to prove that there's a market. You need to have a waiting list, nothing more. And prove that there is a market and that your value proposition is resonating with the audience, right? You tell me you're building a consumer product, 6,000 people on a waiting list. You've proven that there is a market and that your value proposition has been tuned to the point that people want it. The next thing is a pilot. And a pilot is literally, you could say 30, 40 people on a rudimentary version of your product. And what we want to show there is that you can drive this product towards product market fit. I don't want it to be product market fit. I want to start with product market fit at 10%, and I want to finish at 20. And I want to see a line, right? We want to see a progression. All we're showing is your ability to be able to drive this product. Basically, you're saying, Mr. Investor, if you give me more, I can do more of this. I can go up and to the right, which is like the place where like startup success is always there, right? In all the charts, it's like startup goes like up and to the right.
To the moon, to the moon. Great. What's the next big thing?
The next big thing, look, I think there's a huge revolution for early stage startups in no code. There is like, I think the concept of a technical founder, it's blowing up. Like the only reason why you need a technical founder right now is you're in deep tech. You tell me you're going to do something in deep tech, and it's like, yeah, you definitely need a technical co-founder. But no code is just making things explode. It's just such a good opportunity, such a good time to be an early stage founder today. You can go to market really easy, you can go to market really cheap, and you can prove a lot of things with no code. And that's for me, that's the mother of like what's new. I think we're going to see all of these funds pop up that just concentrate on early stage no code. It's just such a good opportunity. It's so cost effective.
I'm secretly glad you said that, because my coding skills are certainly a shadow of their former self. So next up, the purpose of life.
Yeah, for me, it's building businesses that help people, like improve people's lives.
Yeah.
Like, it's like technology is just, the wheel is technology. Like, a shovel is technology, right? It improves people's lives in trying to achieve an outcome, making a hole in the ground, right? And I think looking at startups in that way, in a way that is like, okay, what's your outcome and how are you going to help people achieve it as the core of the business, it's just super powerful.
Absolutely. And those are the businesses that are going to succeed. So win-win. Next up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A scientist. I had a laboratory in the cellar of my parents' house. Yeah.
Glad to see you still got your eyebrows. You're probably better than I was at it. Next up, best skill for entrepreneurs.
For me, it has to be flexibility. And I consider flexibility as the ability to accept that some of your ideas don't work, and being able to listen to the market and to really interpret what the market is saying into a product and a startup. Like it's very difficult to listen to the market. Like I spent years trying to master that skill. It's very, very, very difficult. You need to be really in tune and understand who you're talking to be able to interpret what they're saying and make that into a product. It's very easy to like ask people what they want, but 9 times out of 10, what they want is not what they need, and you end up building something that doesn't work.
Hugely valuable. Thank you. Now, what are you currently reading, watching, or listening to? Anything interesting?
I am highly dyslexic. So I have a co-founder called Darren. He's the one that reads, and I get absolutely everything that he reads through osmosis by working with him. Oh. So I am super lucky in that way. He says that I get to read books by osmosis because my dyslexia is just ramping.
No, that's excellent. I mean, what better way than to learn vicariously? And that's what this podcast is all about. You know, you don't have to do things yourself to learn a lesson. And finally, your favorite type of holiday?
I think my favorite holiday is kind of an involved holiday. Something like going skiing for me is just like, it relaxes your brain because you are doing that. You're not doing anything else. Like sitting in a beach, I get that, but your brain is still going. When you go and do an involved holiday like skiing or going sailing, you're on it. You just can't pay attention to anything else.
Yeah, especially for someone like you whose brain clearly works at 100,000 miles an hour. So yeah, I mean, you can tell. No, great. Thanks, JP. I mean, huge learnings. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have too. So really, thanks for your time today. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's great. Thank you.
Great. Cheers. That's all for this episode. Keep tuning in for more exclusive content on how to succeed as an entrepreneur. Make sure you follow the Tippy Top on all social channels, including Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Insta, YouTube with @the Tippy Top blog, all one word. And find me on LinkedIn, Alexander Lee. Until next time, keep pushing, and I'll see you at the Tippy Top. Cheers.